The sun bore down upon the desolate road from Jerusalem to Jericho, a path known less for its scenic views and more for the lurking peril of its shadowy ravines, a fitting stage for the unfolding of a divine lesson. It was there, amidst the dust and the unforgiving heat, that the man lay, broken and bleeding, a testament to the brutal indifference of the fallen world. His cries, long since reduced to a silent, ragged breathing, went unheard by the general clamor of life. Yet they were perceived keenly by the heavens above. The first to appear, a figure of spiritual eminence, was a priest descending from his duties at the temple, his mind perhaps still wrapped in the sublime rituals of atonement and sacrifice. He was a man whose life was dedicated to the sacred, to the clean separation of the holy from the profane, and the sight of the bloodied, half-dead soul must have presented an immediate, visceral dilemma. His proximity to the sacred texts and the law should have made the answer clear. To love God is to love one's fellow man. Yet a fear, perhaps of defilement, that would bar him from his holy service, or simply a cold terror of the robbers who might still be near, gripped his heart. He gathered his robes about him, tightened the cords of his duty to the temple, and with a conscious, measured pace, he passed by on the other side. His obligation to the ceremonial, the visible form of worship, tragically superseded the immediate, invisible call to human compassion. Close upon the heels of the priest came the Levite, a member of the tribe designated for temple service, a man whose hands assisted in the very purification rites the priest oversaw. His proximity to the man was greater, his hesitation perhaps more prolonged, for he saw the suffering not merely as an obstacle, but as a potential disruption to his own ordered existence. The law which he helped to administer was clear. One must not stand idly by the blood of one's neighbor. Yet the Levite, too, was bound by the rigid, often unfeeling, interpretations of the Mosaic Code. To touch a corpse or someone near death would incur a ritual uncleanness that required elaborate and time-consuming rites of purification. His life was one of sacred routine, and this unexpected, messy intrusion of raw, desperate humanity threatened to unravel that careful tapestry of duty. He paused, his shadow briefly falling upon the injured man, a fleeting moment where grace might have intervened. But his gaze, instead of dwelling on the man's need, fell upon the long road ahead, the pressing engagements and the discomfort of the potential consequences. He, like his superior, chose the path of least resistance, the comfort of compliance with the letter of the law over the spirit of mercy, and passed by on the other side, leaving the wounded man to the mercy of the elements and his failing strength. The actions of the priest and the Levite serve as a stark, dramatic critique of a faith that is intellectualized and ritualized to the point of being utterly divorced from the fundamental, messy demands of love. Their failure was not a failure of doctrine, but a failure of the heart. They saw a problem to be avoided, not a soul to be saved. Their duty to God, they believed, was best served by maintaining a state of ritual purity. Yet their very purity became the vessel of their sin, a hollow shell that could not contain the transformative power of divine love. The law, given as a guide to life, was contorted into an excuse for indifference. They proved in that critical moment that proximity does not equate to neighborliness, and that the highest titles of religion can mask the deepest spiritual poverty. The very traditions they sought to uphold, the traditions of the prophets who cried out for justice and mercy over burnt offerings, were betrayed by their cold calculation. Their righteousness was a stumbling block, and their piety was rendered worthless by their refusal to engage with the gritty reality of suffering, a profound irony that hangs heavy in the narrative air. Then, as the light of hope seemed to dim forever, a third traveler appeared, a Samaritan. His mere presence on that road was a theological and social provocation. Between the Jews, from whom the priest and Levite hailed, and the Samaritans there was no communion, but rather a generations-old bitter schism rooted in doctrinal and ethnic hatred. To the Jews, a Samaritan was a heretic, an unclean half-breed whose very touch was considered defiling, and whose worship was an abomination. In the prevailing social structure of the time, the Samaritan was the absolute other, the one person from whom no mercy or assistance would ever be expected, especially on a road frequented by Jewish travelers. This man, therefore, carried not the weight of religious expectation, but the burden of social contempt. Yet as he drew near, the ingrained prejudice of his own people and the bitterness of his history vanished in the face of the man's dire need. He saw not a Jew, the traditional enemy, but simply a fellow human being, a victim in extremis. The Samaritan's reaction was immediate and utterly without calculation. He was moved with compassion, an instinctive, gut-wrenching response that transcended all theological and political boundaries. His pity was not a fleeting sentiment, but a compelling force for action. He did not pass by, he went to him. This simple act of approach was an act of profound spiritual courage, for he risked the very dangers the priest and Levite had feared, and he willingly embraced the ritual impurity they had so desperately avoided. His response was a total engagement with the victim's suffering. He poured oil and wine into the wounds, ancient remedies used for soothing and cleansing, and then, with tender care, he bound them up. The oil and wine, symbols of healing and restoration in Scripture, were administered with his own hands, transforming common liquids into sacramental acts of mercy. His service was intimate and practical, a physical manifestation of a love that costs something, a love that demands a bending down from one's own concerns to enter into the reality of another's pain. His ministry did not end at the roadside. Having stabilized the man, the Samaritan set him on his own beast and brought him to an inn, a commitment that required time, effort, and sacrifice. For a traveler, time is money, and the beast is a primary means of transport. To divest himself of both for a total stranger was a radical act of generosity. He took on the role of caregiver, spending the night nursing the man, ensuring his comfort and safety. His concern extended beyond the immediate crisis. The next morning, before continuing his journey, he took out 2 denarii, a significant sum, perhaps 2 days' wages, and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back." This promise of return and repayment was the ultimate proof of his enduring, selfless commitment. It was a covenant of care, demonstrating that his compassion was not a fleeting impulse, but a principle that governed his life and his resources. The question posed to Jesus by the lawyer, "Who is my neighbor?" was met not with a legal definition, but with this powerful, transformative narrative. Jesus did not ask which of the 3 was righteous, or which was pure, but which of the 3 proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers. The answer is self-evident, a moral truth so striking that it pierces through the layers of religious dogma and social convention. The neighbor was not the one who shared the victim's bloodline, his faith, or his social standing. The neighbor was the one who showed mercy. The Samaritan, the social and religious outcast, fulfilled the law's highest demand, while the very custodians of that law failed spectacularly. He redefined neighborliness, shifting it from an identity rooted in proximity, ethnicity, or shared belief to an action rooted in compassion. Neighbor is not a noun describing who you are, but a verb describing what you do. Therefore, in the final, undeniable analysis of the parable, the one who proved to be a neighbor was the Samaritan. He embodied the true essence of religious duty, which is to love God with all one's heart and one's neighbor as oneself. His actions serve as an eternal admonition to all who claim a life of faith, that our piety is meaningless if it does not translate into practical, costly care for those in need, especially those who are least like us or whom society has cast aside. It is a divine mandate that demands we cross our self-imposed boundaries of comfort and prejudice to bind up the wounds of a broken world. The Samaritan alone performed the work of love, and it is that work that ultimately justifies and defines the true meaning of a life lived in accordance with the will of God.